أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا والنبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaykum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let's start off. There was a question from the discussion last night. There's only one, so let's go through that and then we can move on to tonight's new topic. So the person asks, why can't ladies go to war or lead Jama'at namaz? Why do women not get to do anything other than run the house and do household chores? So there's two parts of this question. The first is, why can't ladies go to war or lead Jama'at namaz? So first we have to say, who said that women cannot go to war? In traditional Islamic fiqh, they say that it's not wajib for a lady, a female Muslim, to go to war. There's a difference there. We have some narrations that say, for example, at the Battle of Badr, that Bibi Fatima alayha salam was present there, helping. Now, as far as leading Jama'at namaz, there's different ways of answering this question. A woman can lead other women in namaz, right? There's nothing wrong with that. I'm sure the questioner over here probably means, why can't a female lead a mixed Jama'at? That's probably what they're asking. And there's different ways to answer this question. The simple way is that that's what the ahadith mentioned. All the rules that we get in Islam are derived from the Quran, from the words of the Prophet and the Imams. So I haven't done the research myself, but in the ahadith, the reason that a marja will come to this conclusion is because somewhere in the hadith, somebody probably went and asked, for example, Yabna Rasulullah or whatever Imam, and they said, what are the conditions for someone to lead namaz? And on that list of things, for example, we mentioned a couple nights ago, right? We said one of them is that the person needs to be able to pronounce Arabic properly. They should actually know the rules of namaz, right? Of the fiqh masail, for salah. They should be baligh, right? They should be sane. They shouldn't be intoxicated. There's all these conditions, right? They shouldn't be an open sinner. So one of them, according to these ahadith, will be that they have to be a male if it's a mixed gathering. But if it's an all-female gathering, an all-female jama'at, then a female can lead. And if the sister or whoever's asking this question wants something deeper, more of a spiritual, philosophical answer, we can maybe talk about that in the open forum tonight when we go through the Slido questions that were left over in more detail, and some of the ones that were answered but maybe need a bit more information. The second part of the question is, why do women not get to do anything other than run the house and do household chores? So I would respectfully take issue with this question. Maybe I didn't explain myself correctly last night, but I tried to make myself explicitly clear that in Islam, there is absolutely no duty or no wajib duty on a woman in the household. She can sit in the house and do nothing, absolutely nothing, and there's nothing wrong with that in terms of the Sharia. Ethically speaking, in terms of akhlaq and her spiritual journey to Allah, yes, she won't grow as a person. She won't get closer to Allah. But she won't be doing anything haram, so to speak. So I don't know what the questioner here means by not get to do anything. So I guess we'll have to discuss that more in person, inshallah, maybe tonight. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So now on to today's new topic. We want to now discuss this idea, going back to our discussion on fasting. What's the purpose of fasting? How does fasting give us more taqwa? How do we get more conscious of God through staying away from things like food and drink? What's the relationship? The last lecture we had related to this topic, what did we say? We said that one of the things that we're looking for that fasting gives us, or can give us access to, is self-control. The ability sometimes to say no to certain things and say yes to certain things. That self-control, being aware of who we are and making conscious, right, moral choices for our lives so that we can pick what's good for us. Before we get into the discussion of self-control, there's a prerequisite, a preliminary, something else that we have to talk about first. Why are we controlling ourselves? Why shouldn't I just act the way I want to? Why do I have to follow certain rules? The more fundamental, essential question is, what is my purpose in being created? Why am I here in the first place? Why did God put me here? Free will and self-control will be absolutely meaningless unless we understand what goal did God have for us in His mind. What does He want for us while we're here? Because if we understand what goal He has in mind for us, then we can use our free will and our self-control and attach it to that appropriately. If the goal doesn't make sense, if the mission and target and idea that God has in His mind for us, we don't like it, it doesn't make sense, then of course, there's not going to be any reason for us to control ourselves. For example, you might find some atheists who say things that, well, we don't believe that even if there is a God, that He's just. And we don't like that God says, I'm going to put you in heaven or hell if you don't believe or do certain things. So therefore, I don't want to follow religion. Right? This is sometimes the argument that they give. So they've chosen, even though they might believe that there's a God, they say, I don't want to enforce and employ and exert self-control. Why? Because they don't agree with God's goal and His purpose for us. So we need to figure out first, well, what is that purpose? What is that goal? What is that mission? What are we doing here? When we figure this out, then we can understand why our self-control is so important. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Let's take a step back. Why do we make anything at all? Why is anything at all created? You take any item, any creation, any invention, and you can look at it and analyze it from two different perspectives. Let's look at the example of sending your kids to school, right? So, why do kids go to school? What's the purpose? What's the goal? What's the target? What's the mission? We probably, I think most of us would agree, that the reason that kids go to school, the school's purpose, is to give them knowledge, specifically for things that they need that'll prepare them to go out in the world. Maybe that means get a job, maybe that means get ready for college, but just generally speaking, they go to school. The purpose of the school is to get information that will make them ready and prepared for life, right? Now, that's one way of looking at it. Why did the kids go to school? Well, here's the reason why school is there. But there's another reason you can ask the question. Why did the parents send the kids to school? Now, maybe the parent has the same goal in mind. Maybe they say that I want my child to learn, I want them to be prepared for the real world. But maybe not. Sometimes you ask parents, they say, well, everybody else sends their kids to public schools, that's why I'll do it. Right? So it becomes social, cultural pressure, basically habit. Or some might say, I would prefer to homeschool, but because I can't do that, I have to send them out to a public school. Right? So their reasoning is different. Or some of them might just say, I'm sending them to public school, or I'm sending them to daycare, or I'm sending them to madrasa because I just want them out of the house and I want some time to myself. Right? That's it. I just want the house to be quiet for a couple of hours. That's why I want them to go to school. So maybe the parent doesn't really care about their education necessarily. So you see, it's possible for the goal of that invention or that created thing to be one thing, but the goal of the inventor or the person who's sending the individual, it can be something different. So we have to divide our question into two separate questions. First thing we're going to ask is, why are we here? What is our purpose for us being on the earth? What is our job, our mission as human beings? Once we answer that, then we can move on to the second question. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So this question, why were we created? Why are we here? We mentioned it yesterday, right? We talked about it in our lecture regarding the role and the rights and the responsibilities of women in Islam. And we prefaced the discussion by saying what? We said that we have to figure out first what is the goal, what's the point of making human beings? Why are we, whether male or female, why are we here? So we quoted Surah Al-Dariyat, right? Chapter 56, verse 51, where Allah says Himself, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Ahsant. The only reason, God says, the only reason I created jinn and humans is to obey me, is to worship me. And then we said, if you take the tafsir, the explanation that the imams gave in regard to this verse, when they said, what is this ibadat, what is this worship? They say, in reality, this is ma'rifah. This is truly and deeply and really understanding God. This is what God created us for, to understand Him. And you say, sounds cool, but what does that really mean? What do you mean, understand God? How do you deeply, truly recognize God? What does that actually mean? Sometimes we say, okay, the reason for all these rules, the reason for namaz and fasting and hajj and all this akhlaq is so that we can get to heaven. So some people say, well, this ma'rifat, this irfan, this deep spirituality is so we can get to heaven, so we can get rewards over there, and so that we don't end up in hellfire. But is that what deep recognition means, or is there something else behind it? Is our goal heaven and keeping away from hell? Or does God have something greater in His mind for us? So some say this, okay, if the goal was basically just heaven, for us to live peacefully and get whatever we want in heaven, right, all the rewards there, so why did God bother putting us here first? Why didn't He just create us and put us straight in heaven? What's the point of all this? We're suffering on this earth. We have to go through all these trials and tribulations and bala and fitnas and all these issues. If you wanted us to feel happy and live a good life, okay, God, just put us straight in heaven. What's the big deal? Why couldn't you do it? I thought you were all-powerful. The real question that we want to ask here, that's underlying this, is why do we have free will? Why do we have choices? If God didn't give me a choice, and I just did everything He wanted, then I'd be able to get into heaven without any problem. But it's because of free will that I make mistakes, I do sins, I get guna, and now I might end up getting punished for it. Couldn't we have just been made without free will and just, again, been pure, divine creatures, just doing ibadat all the time and being close to God? Why not? So, the first answer that we want to talk about is that God already did that. He created individuals, He created certain beings that don't have any free will, or don't have the free will that we have. And all they do is pure action. And there's two types. One are the angels, and the other are the animals. Angels do what? They completely do ibadah and worship and obey God without any hesitation. So if God, for example, commands a certain angel, like, hey, you, angel number 345, you just do ruku all day for the rest of your life. That's what the angel does. He doesn't say, why. He doesn't make another choice. His purpose for creation, for being created, is you don't get free will. You have to do ibadat, and that's all it does. All he does is ruku. And this other angel over here, okay, you just do sujood, and that's all that angel does. Another angel is ordered, for example, to say, okay, you go and send down rain onto the earth. Or you control, let's say, the natural disasters. Or you control the weather, etc. Right? The angels are assigned something very specific, a mission, a goal, a target, and they do it. And they don't question it. They just go ahead and say, Sami'na wa ata'na. We hear, we obey. So God already made something like that. On the other side, you have animals. Animals also don't have free will in the same way that we understand and have free will, right? So what do? God programs them, say, listen, forget this ibadat stuff. You don't have to pray and worship, no ruku for you. All you need to do is eat, sleep, and procreate. That's it, that's your life. You just move around and do the same thing over and over again. No question of morality, no right and wrong, no heaven or hell. That's what you get. So in their brains, because they don't have free will, they don't have choice, they're not thinking about heaven, they're not thinking about hell, they're not thinking about disobeying God. So now we have an example of two creations. One which does ibadat in one way all the time, and another which just acts like, literally, animals, right? So that's our question. Is God's created both of these? Is this what we want? We say no. We want to do the angel kind of stuff, and we want to do a little bit of the animal kind of stuff, but we want to get rewards too. So we kind of want the best of both worlds, plus we want some rewards. We say, okay, so here's the thing. When angels are doing this, when angels are doing their actions without disobeying, all they're doing is worshiping. That's their goal, that's what they're doing. Animals, when they obey and perform all these worldly, dunyawi things, these animalistic, carnal things, all they're doing is surviving. So now, is there something higher than this? Is there something more perfect than this? Is there something better than this? Is there another possibility we can think of? And how does that tie into our understanding of heaven and hell? Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So for an angel or an animal, there's no idea of enjoying. An angel is not doing ruku, for example, and saying, yeah, this is great. I'm enjoying doing ruku. They're just doing it because they're programmed. They're robots, right? An animal doesn't enjoy eating or sleeping or this. It just does what it has to do because of its instinct. There's no concept of good and evil, of right and wrong, of better and worse, things like that. It's not there. So if you took an angel or an animal and put them in heaven, it wouldn't make a difference to them. They wouldn't understand anything. So now what's the difference for us? What makes humans different? Have you ever had a piece of food, anything, right? You have a bite of really, really good food, like your favorite food, whether it's a piece of cake, a bite of ice cream, for me, maybe a piece of filet mignon, for example. You take that bite and you enjoy it, right? You taste something that's good. Let's say you see something, whether it's out in nature, or you look around at the masjid, you look at a painting, right? Or you look at an individual, and you can say this thing or this person looks good. It looks beautiful. Let's look at another example. Sometimes you feel something good. Maybe you get a massage. Maybe there's a certain bed that you lay down in, that you get comfortable in. There's a certain kind of fabric. When you feel that, you say that it feels good, right? So how do we say for everything, something tasting good, something looking good, and something feeling good? Where does this idea of feeling, tasting, where does this goodness come from? How do we understand good? Where does that come from? It comes from the fact that we also know evil. You figure out when something's good, when you know that something's worse or something's bad. Because we have the ability to compare, to contrast, to make distinctions, that's why things will taste better or things will taste worse. Sometimes something will look better or look more beautiful, or something will look worse or ugly. Something will feel good or feel comfortable versus something feeling harsh or worse or uncomfortable. This idea of good or evil comes because we can make distinctions, because we know the difference between two things. What we say in Islamic sciences, they have this famous saying that تُعْرَفُ أَشْيَاء بِأَضْدَادِهَا. Things are known truly through their opposites. That's how you get ma'rifat of something. Not because you're programmed to know it, but because you yourself with free will make a distinction between two things. So now, how can something taste good? Because you have good and bad food. How can you see something and make a distinction and enjoy it? Because you know what a beautiful thing is and you know what an ugly thing is. How does something feel good? Because you know what's comfortable and you know what's uncomfortable. How do you know when something is light? Because you know what darkness is. How do you know when something's tall? Because you know what shortness is. How do you know when someone has knowledge? Because you know and have seen someone that has ignorance. When you have these kinds of distinctions, these opposites, these comparisons, then you can truly make a choice. Then you can truly appreciate what those things are. Now, if you take that away, is there actually any value when things are presented in front of you? Is there actually any value in if everything tasted the same? If chicken and cardboard and dirt and paper, if it all tasted the same, would there be such thing as enjoyment? No, because you couldn't compare it to anything. It would just be eating. That's it. So heaven and hell, these distinctions, for us, free will is part of the equation. If you want to have enjoyment, then you need to know what it means to not enjoy something. If you want to understand Allah, if you want to understand perfection and goodness, you also need to understand what is imperfection, what is evil, what does it mean to go away from Allah. This is why we have to be created in this world, have to have a specific mission, and we go through these trials and tribulations. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Think about this idea of fasting. Let's say you have two individuals, both of them fasting the same amount of hours, they have the same physical strength, same mental strength, same spiritual strength. They both have the same amount of food for Sayyid. You take the first person, right, and they go about their day. They go to work, they come home, maybe they do some housework, some chores, and maybe we'll say the husbands do it because I think some of the sisters are still upset at some of the points that were made. So the person does that, and then they have their iftar, and they enjoy their iftar. You take the second person. What do? That person locks himself in a room, he ties himself down, he shoots himself up with a drug that knocks him out, and he sleeps up until iftar. Now, both of them did the exact same thing. They both fasted, they both stayed away from food, they stayed away from drink, they didn't have cigarettes or anything like that, right? But is there a difference between the fast of these individuals? Yeah, of course. One of them was basically forced. The second guy was forced. There was no struggle there. So them, iftar doesn't really have any meaning anymore. But that first person tasted what it meant to feel hungry. They tasted what it felt like to be thirsty. They tasted and understood self-control so that when they actually took that first bite, that first sip of water, they could say, Alhamdulillah, shukran lillah. Because now they went through this struggle. They saw what it means to not have something. When they had it, then they truly appreciated it. You know, they have this famous saying, you don't really love something, you don't really appreciate something until you let it go and you lose it, right? So sometimes that happens with friends and family. I know myself, I've lost both of my parents. And as much as I love them, as much as I thought I had my attachment to them, once I lost my mother first and then my father, then I really saw that I lost something. I really lost a piece of what was making me whole, especially when I lost my mother. And for those who have lost their mothers, you know yourself. When you lose your mother, a whole part of you just dies. You can never get that back. No one ever can replace that feeling. When you lose something, then you really know, now I know what I didn't have. Now I know what was there, and now that I don't have it, now I see. Now I see the difference. They give this example as well. A fish doesn't care about water until you pull it out. That's when it starts gasping and breathing. When you put it back in, then it takes this sigh of relief, this breath of relief. That's what we need. Because once, inshallah, we end up in heaven, then we can take our sigh of relief. Because we can now truly appreciate it, because we've gone through the struggles in this world. If you're just a robot that's programmed to be Muslim, heaven's not going to have any value for you, nor would hell. They'd be meaningless things. Pain wouldn't mean anything. Pleasure wouldn't mean anything, because there's no comparison. You're just being programmed. There's no feeling there. There's no emotion there. There's no spirituality. Part of spirituality, part of free will, is this ability to see what's right and wrong. So, to sum up, the reason that we need free will, that we have these difficulties, the reason that we're created, that's why we can truly recognize what's good. Therefore, that's how we truly recognize Allah. That's what ma'rifatullah means. And Allah says, that's why I created you. I created you to know me, to know goodness, to know perfection. And you can understand perfection when you truly experience imperfection. Do you want to know what pure good is? Do you want to know Allah? Fine. Look at what not being good is. Then you'll really know what I'm capable of. Then you really appreciate me. Then you'll really thank me. And the last quote, I guess I'll leave before we go into a quote from an imam. And I really like this quote. They say, to get to heaven, you got to go through hell. To get to heaven, you have to go through hell. Now we'll end and wrap up and put all these things together of us thinking about angels and animals and free will from a hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. So we're ending with this hadith, so then after that we'll move on to questions inshallah. So Imam says, and this is a very famous narration, and because it's beautiful, I prefer to read the Arabic and then translate for you as well. Imam says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ رَكَّبَ فِي الْمَلَائِكَةِ أَقْلًا بِلَا شَهْوَةٍ. Allah has most definitely, absolutely composed and created and constructed the angels with aql, but without shahwa. So they have pure intellect. They're nothing but brains, but they have no desires. So there's nothing that pulls them into something negative. They have nothing that pulls them to disobedience. The other side, وَرَكَّبَ فِي الْبَهَائِمِ شَهْوَةً بِلَا عَقْلٍ. Now on the other side, you've got animals, these creations, these creatures. Animals are made with what? All shahwa, all desire, carnal desire and pull, without any aql whatsoever. So it's just surviving. It's just doing things without comprehending what's going on. Now what about us? What about humans? Imam says, وَرَكَّبَ فِي بَنِي آدَمْ كِلْتَيْهِمَا. In the children of Adam alayhi salam, you get both. Both of these things. You get the aql and you get the shahwa. You have that pull towards God, that pure intellect which shows you what's good and what's higher and what's better, but you also get that pull towards what's worse, what's materialistic, what's evil, what's imperfect, which is your shahwa, your desire, your animal nature. فَمَنْ غَلَبَ أَقْلَهُ شَهْوَةً فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ هُوَ خَيْرٌ مِنَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. If our intellect supersedes and dominates our shahwa, then we get better than the angels. Now you understand why. An angel, when it does something with its intellect, nothing is pulling it down. If we do something with our intellect, we had to pull down, so it makes us better. Remember that multiple choice analogy. An angel has no choice but to write down the right answer. It doesn't get multiple choice. We get the choice of good, and then one type of evil, another type of evil, another. All these different types of decisions we could be making. At that time for namaz, how many different things and possibilities could we be doing at Fajr time? Right? At the very least, in the month of Ramadan, you could be eating. But you've controlled yourself and say, no, my aql is telling me that I should obey God, and now I start my fast. And then I pray. You could be using the computer, you could be on your phone, you could be watching TV, you could be playing video games, you could be playing sports, you could do anything at namaz time. But when your aql tells you and it pulls you back to God, and it pulls you to what's good, Allah says you become better than an angel. An angel has no choice, but we have a choice. But the other side, وَمَنْ غَلَبَ شَهْوَتُهُ أَقْلَهُ. If your desires, your animalistic nature, the one that just wants to eat and sleep and do basic things, then فَهُوَ شَرٌّ مِنَ الْبَهَائِمِ. Then you're worse, you're more evil than an animal. Why? Because you had the ability to process something better. You had an aql that was pulling you back to God. You made a conscious choice to be worse. You could have done better, you chose the wrong decision. And then you have to suffer the consequences. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We said that understanding why we're created is two different things. This answer was what's our purpose? What's our purpose? Is to reach perfection, to be the best that we can be and get back to God. Understand Him, get ma'rifah. How do we do that? We have this ability to choose between good and evil. When you make that good choice, then that reward you get in heaven tastes sweet, feels good, will be good for us. If you want shahr, if you want evil, then you'll also get to taste, as Allah says, that boiling water. You'll get to taste that burn in hellfire. Why? Because that's what you wanted to pull yourself towards. Now the other question we had to say is, okay, that's why we're here. That's our purpose. That's what school, that's what the earth and our humanity has been created for. But what about God? What was in His mind? Why did He make us? The same way we said, why did the parent send the child to school? Why did God actually make this stuff in the first place? That, inshallah, we will discuss tomorrow night. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. One more salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Although mothers don't have the responsibility, they want to do the best for their kids. Something young, Hasan, thank you. So young mothers are under a lot of pressure, but lack support from extended family, community, as opposed to past generations. What mindset can we adopt to help us through these challenging yet crucial years? So this discussion about parenting, Islamic parenting, is, like I've mentioned before, is very, very important. And it won't do it justice to kind of give a few answers. I mentioned a few, I think, last week. And I believe that there will be a session specifically dedicated to this for those who are part of that group tomorrow night. But if you want to try to offer maybe a few words. We definitely know that in this country, in this society, the same kind of support system, the same ideology we had back where we came from, right, in the East, what we had over there, that social, family, community structure is not here. Now yes, we have a masjid, we have a Husseini, or we have these things. And we try our best to congregate around that and try to develop a community like this. That's our assumption. Our first question is do our centers actually encourage this? Are we congregating and coming together just to recite du'as and ziyarat and pay khums and just do general ibadat like this? Or are we trying to set up an Islamic family and community together? If we're just coming so that we can be friends and buddies and hang out, okay, that's one thing. But if we're trying to work together and do amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar, which is essential for an Islamic community, without it, you can never progress. If the community is trying to improve and become better Muslims, everyone in the community, then social structures and community things and events and programs have to be put in place so that people can grow. Especially for this. Maybe some individuals here don't have support. So individuals here who have strong families, strong ties, have information in regards to parenting or counseling, whatever it is, they should extend their services, their support to the center so that people know that they're available. So for example, if you have a background in psychology or social work or counseling, services like this should be offered in the center. Because right now, there are so many Muslims, forgetting non-Muslims, they have their own issues. We now are facing the same issues that the rest of this country is facing. We are depressed, we're under stress, we're overworked, we're underpaid. We have a disconnect with our religion, a disconnect from God. We have a disconnect with our family members. We're suffering in this society. We're being stressed out, we're depressed. And many individuals are just jumping right to drugs or alcohol or even prescription drugs. This is the most country in the world. Most people are on antidepressants. But there's ways to counsel a person into developing mental health and well-being. There's an Islamic perspective to this as well, and there are some who have done the work. Inshallah, maybe at some other time we can have a separate workshop for that. But those who have the Western background, it's good for them to work with ulama who have the Islamic psychology, social work background to develop services here, work with the ulama and the people who are here, and try to develop that support system. And I'll leave it there. Yesterday, you mentioned a few points for Islamophobia, which are presented by non-Muslims to us. Can you provide an answer or answers for witness of women and men's, the question of witnesses. So the question we mentioned yesterday, in our topic, we talked about certain misconceptions or certain issues that non-Muslims have with Islam. One of them being that in Islam, in a court case, in order to present evidence, either one male can come forward and present evidence, present their testimony, and see that, for example, yes, this person did take a loan, or the equivalent would be two women would have to come forward. So this issue, there's a few different things to discuss. One is that there is a slight difference of opinion among ulama. Right? There's a few maraji who say that's not necessary, and they have a different approach to fiqh. That's one way. But even if we say, for example, that there's 2 to 1, we have to offer now, it's going to depend on who you're speaking with. Because there's no one answer for everybody, right? Every person you speak to is going to be different. At the very least, you have to explain to an individual that we believe in a rational God, meaning using our brains, we prove that a God exists. We also prove that this God is just and only does what is good. And then this same just God sent down prophets, messengers, and gave us imams, a book of guidance. From that book, from the imams, from the prophets, they gave us a sharia. They gave us a way to live our lives. Sometimes we might not see why a rule is rational. We might not be able to figure it out. But because we know the source of it only does good, only does things which are rational and good for us, we still know rationally that the rule has to be for our benefit. So this is one way you can answer, right? To show that we don't just do it on blind faith. We have a rational reason for why we believe in God and His justice and His goodness, And He gives us guidance so we can reach our perfection. So this rule, like any other rule, is designed for our perfection. The last one, in your opinion, is performing and perfecting our wajibat enough to take us to heaven? Well, according to our urafa, my own opinion doesn't really matter. When they ask the scholars of akhlaq and irfan, they say, for example, people would go to Ayatul Bahjat, may Allah bless his soul. They go to Imam Khomeini, they would go to Ayatul Khushwaht. All these big scholars, they'd ask them, what should we do? How do we get better? How do we make sure that we don't go to hell? They said the first thing that you need to do is make sure you're not doing anything haram. After that's done, then you work on your wajibat. This is the basic level of taqwa you have to develop. After that, then you can start working on mustahabbat. Then after that, you can stop doing things which are makruh. And then the highest level that they say is, then you want to start eliminating things which are mubah. What does that mean? Well, I can't tell you. Well, at least right now I can't tell you. So I think we'll have to stop there, inshallah. We'll leave these questions and any other questions for the session that will happen after the program, inshallah. So again, just to break down how we're going to have this open forum, that will be in this hall, I believe, right? Yeah, this hall. You don't know. Okay, it's in this hall, I'm pretty sure. So in the first half, we'll have a short kind of conversation. And it'll be a discussion on what it means to be a modern Muslim. So we're going to have an open conversation about that. After that's done, we can go back and forth and see if there's any questions about that. If we get finished with that discussion and there's nothing left over, then we can move on to some of the Slido questions that weren't answered, or we can go back to questions that completely weren't addressed or weren't addressed in depth. And then if there's still time, which most likely there won't be, then maybe we can go after these two questions, inshallah. وآخر دعوان